All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for sitting the day on with us for Cesar Chavez's birthday. You are here for a virtual conversation honoring the legacy of Cesar Chavez. And so on behalf of the Day of Service Planning Committee, we are excited to have you here for a very thoughtful and engaging conversation. We have a few housekeeping matters that we'll take care of before we start with our keynote speakers. Just to give you some background, we typically at Cal State San Marcos present this day as a day on versus a day off. It is a holiday here in the state of California, which we're grateful for because that is where Cesar Chavez did most of his work for the farm workers movement. And normally we have a half-day event where we have a keynote speaker in the beginning before we send out over 200 to 250 students into the local community for a couple of hours of service. And so this year, because of COVID-19, the planning committee and I decided to pivot to a virtual day of service. And so honoring the week of National Farm Workers Awareness Week last week, Thursday up until today, we provided some virtual volunteer opportunities as well as some civic action opportunities that you can do online. Hopefully you had a chance to participate. If you did, I would love to hear what organization you supported by typing it in the chat if possible. But we are on Zoom, so I just want to make sure of our little etiquette. Feel free to use your reactions. We've gone ahead and made sure that you can chat with us directly. Co-hosts, there's 11 of us in the chat. You can talk to us directly. You can use the reactions if you hear something that you love or enjoy. Feel free to use a smiley face, a thumbs up, wave, or a high five as you feel free. We do ask that you turn off your cameras so that we can preserve the bandwidth. And that way to help us also just spotlight our speakers a little more versus seeing a bunch of little black squares. So if possible, please do turn off your cameras. And this event is going to be recorded so that we can share it with us because we know it's going to be a great conversation. So we have it for a long time. And if you have any concerns, feel free to chat with myself directly or with Floyd Lai. And I apologize. My name is Rochelle Smar. I'm the Director for Service Learning and Civic Engagement here at Cal State San Marcos. And I have a whole host of Day of Service Planning Committee members who have helped create this event with me. And so for today's event, we are going to have a moderator. Her name is Angela Mendez Alvarado. She was born in Michoacan, Mexico, and raised in the Coachella Valley. Angela is a first-generation college student pursuing a double major in sociology and criminal justice with an expected graduation of May 2021. So woohoo, she's survived COVID-19 and is able to graduate in the middle of a pandemic. Angela has hands-on agricultural and farm worker experience. She witnessed her mother and her brother work tirelessly in the fields of Coachella, and she herself works in the great fields and packing houses. Angela is aware of the inequities facing the farm worker community and wants to give back. Currently, she works as an intern for the College Assistance Migrant Program here at Cal State San Marcos, affectionately known as CAMP, where she's a peer mentor. She's been able to gain valuable experience in what it means to provide access and support to students in similar situations as her own. After graduation, she hopes to pursue a passion of social work and helping others that she hopes to serve in underrepresented communities. So if you can, please use a reaction to give a warm round of applause to our moderator, Angela Alvarado. Angela, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Rochelle. It is an honor to be here and represent the CAMP program, first generation college students and migrant workers, while honoring the legacy of Cesar Chavez and the movement that it has caused then and now. Before I get started, I do want to apologize if you hear any background noise. I am in Mexico and I live in a ranch, so you might hear the vendors or people with music, so I apologize for that. But I am excited to introduce the two speakers and learn from them as well. Our first keynote speaker is Dr. Laura Rendon, who is a professor emerita at University of Texas, San Antonio. A native of Laredo, Texas, Dr. Rendon's passion is ensuring that the nation's educational system fosters for all students, specifically those who are low income and first generation. She developed validation theory, an asset-based student success framework that has been employed to frame research studies and programmatic activities in 2- and 4-year colleges and universities. She is the author of the book Senti Pensante, Sensing and Thinking, Pedagogy, Educating for Wholeness, Social Justice and Liberation, as well as numerous publications focusing on students and success and contemplative education. We are excited to have Dr. Rendon here and share about her experiences growing up along the US and Mexico border and her insights as a friend of farm workers.
Thank you, Angela, and congratulations on all that you've done as a student. I'm sure you're going to go very, very far, and it's such a pleasure that I have the opportunity to speak to all of you here today on this day of service. I also want to take the opportunity to thank all of our farm workers, all of the people that have paved the way for so many of us because of their service and their sacrifice for us to succeed and move forward in society. I want to begin just by saying a little bit about who I am. I grew up in the borderlands of Texas and Mexico, Laredo, Texas, right on the US-Mexico border. I have a picture of myself when I was 6 years old, and my mother bought me a pair of moccasins because that's what I wanted. On my right is my little sister, Ileana, and on my left, my cousin, Elma. And you can see in the back where we used to live, not a very nice house. So essentially my life has been one of moving from the barrios of Laredo, Texas, where I experienced growing up in poverty. I've never been a farm worker, but several of my friends were farm workers. In Laredo, Texas, the trip was to go to the Midwest and to pick crops in the Midwest. In particular, I have my friend, Dr. Arturo Rios, a psychiatrist in Houston, who went many times to the Midwest. That was a legacy in the family. He tells me the stories of when they were kids and they were out there, and their mom, her job was to stay in the little shack where they used to live and cook and clean and make sure that they had clean clothes and a warm meal when they returned from the fields. She used to pull his toe because he was the oldest one and he was supposed to set the example. And so he got up before all of his siblings. And every year, almost every year, they would come back with a new car. It wasn't brand new, but it was a new car to them. So I listened to his story and just think of the many sacrifices that his family made. But he made it all the way to being a psychiatrist. So he's one of those success stories as well, Dr. Arturo Rios. So I understand that there are many issues facing farm workers today, and I made a list of those. Of course, the impact of COVID-19 that I've seen on television and the impact that it's had. Of course, even before that, we had pesticide exposure and so many other kinds of issues, including women facing discrimination and sexual harassment. At the same time, many immigrants and low-income first-gen students are facing challenges in colleges and universities. And I just made a list of some of these challenges that we experience in college as first-generation student, which I was the first in my family also to go to college. And these are actual comments that students have made to me when I've been able to speak with them or to read about their narratives. All the way from health-related issues to leaving their native countries, having undocumented status, racism, lots of that still going on, unfortunately, in colleges and universities today. And then not really knowing what it takes to go to college, not knowing how to access financial aid. If you want to be a scientist, growing up and not knowing anybody that's been a scientist. And then there are language issues, writing, publishing, and presenting skills that need to be developed, dealing with academic shock because we come from neighborhoods and communities and barrios where, that world is very different than the world of college. So when we enter college, it's kind of a shock to us. And then poverty, living with limited resources, and many of us having to take care of our brothers and sisters or being the man or the woman of the house. So all of these are challenges that students face in college. So then what is it going to take to help us to succeed, to get more students to have a great experience in higher education? One of the things that I've learned that is very important is to have a validating relationship with at least one caring, compassionate person. That one person in or out of college that is going to be there for you, that is going to lift you up. And I'll give you, one particular example of that. But what I believe is needed with this sense of validation is that it's going to help us, it's going to help students find a sense of belonging. It's going to help you feel connected. It's going to help you feel that you can really do this. Because unfortunately, so many of our students face different forms of invalidation, being told that we're not good enough, that we can't succeed, being, not feeling welcome in college, because so many of the spaces and the people and the artifacts don't reflect who we are. And this is where camp and the programs like camp become very important, because they're safe spaces for us to be who we are. But relationships, caring, empathy, compassion are needed to work with students. I'll give you an example. Many of you students in particular know who Lizzo is. Lizzo is a Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, and flutist, Time Magazine's 2019 Entertainer of the Year. When Lizzo is asked who made the biggest difference in her life, and she's now a superstar, okay? She always goes back to her band director, Manny Gonzalez. In school, she played the flute, and Manny Gonzalez told her, you're an excellent flutist, you're gonna go a long way. What Lizzo didn't know is how far she would go. But even today, being this multimillionaire now, she turns back and refers to Manny Gonzalez as the person who really saw in her what perhaps she couldn't see in herself at that time. I have a little clip of Lizzo talking about Manny Gonzalez and this comes from the program CBS This Morning.
Back.
Hey, Dr. Rendon, we don't see the video. Do you mind stopping share on your PowerPoint and then restarting the video?
A special.
Okay,
Apply
hold on a
yourself.
second.
Those moments mean so much to me. Huh?
All right, what happened? You can't see the video?
No, we cannot see your videos, so you might have to.
Okay, we saw it before, so I'm not sure what happened. Okay, you want me to stop and do what?
I was suggesting if you stop sharing your PowerPoint, like stop sharing the screen, and then reshare with the image of the video with Lizzo.
Okay, it's optimized. Okay, in the desktop. All right, let's try this. Can you see the video now?
Yes, we can.
We brought him back.
How you doing?
Oh my God, I'm so good. Oh my God.
I'm very proud of you.
Thank
You've
you.
been doing good.
Wow, I did it, didn't I? You told my ass, you were like, get it together, girl, because you are special. Apply yourself. Those moments meant so much to me. Hi. He was like,
So
we brought him back.
that's what I mean about having that person in your life who believes in you, who feels you can do this. Connect to someone who's going to be there for you. So important to have a validating agent. Another thing that is going to be really, really important is recognizing our own strengths. Sometimes we feel like we don't have any strengths, and we certainly do. And some of them really come from our culture. The beautiful strength, for example, of giving back. I've learned that students, they want to earn a college degree. They want to get an education, but it's not just to learn facts and figures, though that's very important. They want to use their knowledge to put something back into their communities. They want to be role models. They want to make this world a better place to live. And then we have ganas, we have determination. That's something that I wanted to do. I wanted to make something of my life. I wanted to get out of poverty. That kept me going. We're resilient. We resist. We've resisted poverty. We've resisted racism. We've resisted microaggressions. And then we have navigational ability. We've figured things out. We've maneuvered ourselves in different contexts in the world of college, in the world of our homes and communities. And we have this sense of curiosity. And here's a student talking about the importance of giving back.
Scare. Because that means if I'm one of the first, I'm pretty much the one setting up the path for the ones that are coming behind me. And that means that whatever decisions I make or whatever path I choose to take, it's not only going to affect me, but it's going to affect everyone coming behind me, whether it's my sister, my neighbor, or just any female or Latina that's, the next generation. And that's pretty scary because it's not just me anymore.
It's not just me anymore. This is where she believes that giving back, giving of herself is so, so important. I have a picture of a student who, her name is Carmen Serrata, and this is her defending her doctoral dissertation at the University of Texas, Austin. Carmen was in my class, master's degree class at the University of Texas, San Antonio. And she told me her story. Her story is that she and her parents crossed the border. They came with nothing. But one thing that the family could do was make tamales. And so they started selling tamales. And that's how they survived, by selling tamales to the community. Carmen went on to get her education and to go on all the way to getting her doctoral degree. And you see the title of her doctoral dissertation, Escaleras hacia el éxito, Ladders to Success, Latino Immigrant Parents' Understanding of College Readiness. And so there she is with her family and her faculty members, so proud. And she sent me this picture after she left my class several years later to tell me, I'm now Doctora Carmen Serrata. So many of us have gone through so many experiences that have been so tough, but yet these are stories of hope. These are stories of opportunity. These are stories of resilience. Que sí podemos, sí se puede. And so I just want to end with a short narrative, a short poem that I wrote several years ago when I thought about my own experiences. ¿Quién soy yo? The truth is that I am more than what I appear to be today. No one really knows that I am the young girl who wanted nothing more than a pair of moccasins for her 6th birthday. They seemed to be such an extravagant purchase at the time. It was when we lived in a 2-room shack with an outhouse. It was a time that I had so long cleverly blocked from my memory. El dolor, the pain, numbs the senses. I am the high school student who didn't get invited to the senior prom because she was unattractive, unlike the girls who found their way into school clubs and organizations, not for what they knew, but for how they looked. The girl who was told by the sponsor of the Future Teachers of America that she would never be a teacher because she had made an F in chemistry. Teachers don't make Fs, she said. She didn't know that I had sprained my knee so badly that I could not walk to school for weeks, but there was no money to see the doctor. No más no había dinero. And this was just the way it was. I'm the graduate student who left Laredo to take the risks my parents were afraid of. The Chicana at the University of Michigan, filled with awe at the sheer fact that I was there, and knowing full well mi familia did not understand what I was doing or where I was going. Soy la mujer haunted by childhood memories, buried deep in my subconscious, appearing to me in dreams of evil spirits, wanting to penetrate mi cuerpo, terrorizing my trembling body. I am a multiplicity of identities that frighten me, guard me, teach me, love me. And so I end by telling all of the students and reminding all of us that we have, through our service and through our commitment to our people, a chance to change the world. And Dolores Huerta has a beautiful quote that every moment is an organizing opportunity, every person a potential activist, every minute a chance to change the world. Thank you for inviting me, and my very best to particularly all the students who I know will change this world. Muchísimas gracias. Okay, I think the next person is up.
Thank you, Dr. Rendon. Be sure to post your questions in the chat for Dr. Rendon. Our team will be collecting the questions and we will be sharing them during Q&A session. So up next is Dr. Jose Manuel Villarreal. Dr. Villarreal is the principal at Oceanside, and he is family of farm workers. Blythe, an agricultural area in Riverside County, sits by the Colorado River near California and Arizona border. His father, Jose Macario Villarreal, was an active part of the farm workers movement with Cesar Chavez, who taught his son to pay attention to his community identity and identify where help was needed and do all that was supposed to fill the need. He began his career in education as a college tutor and mentor, became a college counselor in Riverside County, and after being given the opportunity to be an assistant principal and principal in Vista, he became a senior director for the Juvenile Court and Community Schools with the San Diego County Office of Education. This afternoon, we welcome Dr. Villarreal, or Dr. V, as he affectionately is called by the students and his friends, to share his experience growing up in the fields and the importance of language.
Muchas gracias, señorita Méndez, doctora Rendón. Agradezco mucho toda su atención. I just want to say again, my name is Dr. Villarreal, Dr. V. I'm here with you today. I'm very proud to be here with you today. Very honored to be. I'm humbled, certainly, that I would be asked to do this. But one of my dad's favorite songs, he passed away 5 years ago, is Los Caminos de la Vida no son como yo pensaba. And really, it's to really remind us that the roads of life are not what I thought of, right? And what they were really going to be for us in our life, and mine particularly. But I'll say that, you know, my dad's life started as a bracero. He was brought over with the workers during the 40s and the 60s, during that time realm. And, you know, he'd always say, hay que sufrir para merecer. That would be his quotes. And so as I speak to you today, I'm going to speak with a lot of dichos, a lot of idioms that I hope you can take away and understand how I apply them in my life. But at the end of the day, I do live by this. You have to suffer to deserve. I am a grinder by nature. I probably feel like I can outwork anybody because I would watch them do this when it would be 3 in the morning and the radio would be on and my mom would be up welcoming my dad back from the night shift, working in the fields, and she was preparing food for him, his lonche, right, which is slang term in Spanish, his lunch. And she was getting ready for her time to go out early in the morning to the fields of the tomate, la lechuga, la cebolla, el algodón, you know, all of these places that they eventually took me to and I was part of. And I remember having my bandana on my head and having my boots with a bunch of blisters within hours of being out in el algodón, because they would say to me, hay que sufrir para merecer. But the reality was, later they said, we wanted you to experience this so you don't come back to it. And I thought that was a really powerful moment, and that realization that the suffering of the blisters, the la madrugadas, waking up super early, was really a reminder that how they got here is how I need to get here. Whatever that here was, right? When I was in Blythe as a small town, growing up as a first generation English learner, and really trying to understand what that movement of the bracero was. And now I understand it fully, because when I went to the community college at Palo Verde College and transferred to the UC Riverside, I took my first Chicano studies course and my eyes opened up big and wide that my father and my mother were making history in front of me. And now the challenge that I had is to continue that history And how was I going to do that? Boy, I'll tell you what, that pressure was big, because I remember transferring and realizing immediately, I don't know how to study. I don't know how to really read textbooks. I had 2 jobs when I transferred to UC Riverside. I remember speaking to the dean after the first semester, being put on academic probation and losing my scholarship from the Seroptimist of $750 because I couldn't keep up with the work. And I realized that if I didn't get my act together and stop worrying about money, that in the end, I was going to go back to Blythe with no degree and really disappoint not only my parents, but my ancestors. So I think that this notion is really important. I'd say the next one is really this idea of la huelga, right? No, no, no nos moverán. Look that up. That's the rhythm. That's the song of the Cesar Chavez hymnal of the Dolores Huerta work. They both were at my home when I was a child. I don't know who these people were. I don't know what they were about, but I was really later learned and understood that they were there to break up ranchers who actually sprayed my parents and my friends and my family, because in order to save money, they decided to spray them with those airplanes, the pesticides, because if you pull them off the fields, you're going to waste time and money. And so they started getting sick, and they started protesting and stopping this from happening in my town of Blythe, California. What you see here are images on the right-hand side of the flag that is in my home. And as my dad said, esta bandera tiene sangre. This flag has blood on it, because this is what they use in those protests and stopping those ranchers from coming onto our campus, that's funny, into our fields. But those buttons you see here, those are wins, by the way. Every time you see a button, that means they shut a rancher down. Every time you see a button, that means they actually stopped work that day. And those are huge wins, because they tried to hit the pocketbooks of those ranchers. You know what they used to call, you know what they call that nowadays? The cancel culture, right? They try to cancel grapes. They try to cancel lettuce. They try to cancel beer. That all why? Because those industries were providing work for people without restrooms, without healthcare, without breaks. They had none of that. And that's what they were trying to say and do. Is Cesar Chavez a controversial figure? Of course he is. Did he say some things that you look back on and say, wow, I wish he wouldn't have said that? Of course. But those were trying times. Everyone was trying to do their best with what they had. So when I sit and I listen to those that have painted the roads for us, as I'm doing, as Dr. Rendon is doing for you, know that we are not perfect, but we are trying to paint that road to try to give you an opportunity to do better. And so as a union organizer, I always remember that, no nos moverán. But always that saying, that famous saying in my culture, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. Right? Tell me who you're hanging with and I'll tell you who you are. And I, as much as I hated that when I was growing up, because I knew he was judging my friends, I knew he was judging who I hung around with, he was absolutely right. And so was my mother. My dad would say, hijo, no hay amigos. No hay amigos. There are no friends. What are you talking about? Of course I have friends. What are you talking about? And now I know what he's talking about. What he's saying is, in the end, you've got to make sure that you are good in your soul, in your spirit, in your person, in your head, in your heart, before you go out and search for that in other people. And this bandera is another one that he held, and he's standing here with Cesar walking in Blythe, California, in front of the old Albertsons store, walking with them and strategizing about how to continue to fight against those workers, for those workers, against those ranchers in Blythe. So remember of the company you keep. They do reflect upon who you are and what you're trying to do. If they're not fulfilling your life, it's time to move on. Even those that you knew since you were super young. This is right before his passing. Yeah. It's tough. It's been 5 years. And I think that as a man, he taught me how to be emotional. taught me to cry. But he was an alcoholic. He was a womanizer. He had his trauma. Now I understand it. Did when I was young. A lot of us don't understand why our parents curse at us. They're scared. Why they tell us to be home by 9. They're scared. This world is really scary when you're a bracero and you're told to get in line and be sprayed with pesticides to clean you because you're coming from across the border. This place is scary when all you get to eat is once a day and you're in 120-degree weather. This place is scary. This place is scary when they're cleaning houses, when their hands smell like bleach, when they're being yelled at because of the color of their skin and because they don't speak English. It's scary. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying have some grace with your parents, with your uncles. If they did something bad to you, I understand. But it's trauma. And in the end, si no yo, ¿quién? Who's going to do the work? You being here today says everything, whether you're actually paying attention to this presentation or not. But it means a lot for you to be here. Extend yourself to others who need that, is what I would strongly recommend. If not me, then who? But I continue to fight and struggle with our own culture. Let me tell you why. Because my dad would say to me, sea humilde, hijo, sea humilde. Yeah, but it doesn't mean to be silent either. And sometimes we don't know how to tell our story because we don't want to be braggadocious. We don't want to seem arrogant. But who's going to tell our story if you don't? This is my mother and my 2 sons. It's really important to remember that at the end of the day, no one's going to tell your story but you. Build a network. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to students at the university, high school students, community members that I've given my phone number to, and they never call because they're too humble. He's too busy. So I'm going to put my LinkedIn, my information on there. I would love you to follow me, reach out. If you know me, whether you're a Latino, whether you're white, whether you're young, whether you're old, I'm willing to help. I'm willing to give that support. But if you're not hungry and you're not ready to receive it, then reach out when you are. But you got to learn how to tell your story. You have to learn to be savvy with social media and be smart about it. No one else will. And always remember, as Dr. Rendon reminded us, si se puede. Never forget that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Villarreal. Thank you for sharing all your stories and your insight. And thank you for giving advice to the CSUSM community and how to advocate for farm workers. Now it's time for questions from our virtual audience. And here's a question for Dr. Rendon. What are your educational efforts or projects that are aimed at providing assistance to migrant college students?
My work is targeted to all underserved students, including migrant students. So everything that I do is for first generation low-income students, whatever their other backgrounds and identities are. That has been my passion, from the very beginning, because I am one of these first generation low-income students that started out basically with nothing. And as I continued my education, I thought that it was important for educators to learn more about our experiences because they're very different from privileged students. We don't have parents that can take us to Europe. We don't have parents that are wealthy that can pay for college, that can get us tutors. I mean, we don't have any of those privileges, so to speak. And so my whole passion and all of my work, all of my research is to help first-gen low-income students to succeed in college.
Thank you so much. Now here's the next question, and it's gonna be for Dr. Villarreal. What are your earliest memories of your family interactions with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta?
I just actually talked to her and introduced her to Dolores Huerta. I mentioned I met with her virtually. I was able to have a conversation with her live with National Parents Union. It's on their Facebook if you want to see it. It was a really good conversation we had. And I would say that my memories would be that they were in my home, this little trailer that we lived in Blythe, and just a ruckus was going on around me. And then I remember meeting Cesar, and when I was a kid, mass with us and walked and did a little bit of protest in our city. And I just remember that there was this sort of talk about being humble, but at the same time, the energy that the others had for him was just inspiring. And then seeing my parents uplifted because of that, seeing them continue, that made me say, wow, if my parents who are jaded in some way, right, about life, can trust this little guy who's doing so many amazing things for us. I said, wow, I will always, I never put people on a pedestal, but I do admire people's work. And so I would say those are the memories I had. Thank you for asking that question.
Thank you so much for responding. So the following question is gonna be for both of our guest speakers. So it's gonna be, tell us a bit more about yourself and your connections to the farm workers movement or migrant farm workers.
Go ahead, Jose. Go ahead, Dr. Villarreal.
Yeah, I just would say, thank you, Dr. Rendon. I just would say, to me, the farm worker movement is alive and well because we're always going to need fruits, we're always going to need vegetables, we're always going to need that support. And I do have to brag and say one of the beauties of being a farm worker when my dad was regando, right? He was irrigating the fields, was he taught me how to use the shovel with both sides of my body so I never get tired. So if anybody wants to have a contest, I'd love to show you, even in my fat self here as I'm getting older. But I feel pretty good that I can handle that today. But I would say that that's sort of what, when you asked that question, I don't know why that struck me so much, but there's so much good that comes out of that type of work in that community. I was raised by 4 strong Latino Mexican women who were farm workers and who led cuadrillas, right? Who led these groups of workers to work. And that's why I think I just appreciate that so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I have to offer is the work that I've done in higher education with regard to helping low-income first-generation students. For example, I developed that theory of validation that I talked about earlier. And I'm always so pleased when I see that work is actually employed. I see a message here from Minerva Gonzalez that says that the theory is guiding the PASO Title V grant. And so that just is thrilling beyond anything, that I can imagine, because that's the greatest compliment to a scholar when his or her work is being employed to actually make a difference for students. And so validation theory, the theory of student assets, identifying the assets that students bring to college, particularly those students who are underserved in American society, so that we're not viewed with a deficit framework, but that we're viewed with an asset-based framework, that they see our strengths, they see us as people who can actually succeed, who have talents, who have resilience, who want to make something of themselves, as I did so long ago when I wanted to be a teacher and I didn't know how to do it because no one in my family had been to college. My mom worked as a waitress, making $10, $15 a week plus tips. And many times that's what we survived on. So those opportunities help shape who I am. I've never forgotten where I've come from. And you can count on me to do everything I can to put out the word about our people, the sacrifices that we made, but how strong we are, how resilient we are, and how we can make a difference in this society.
Thank you so much. We have a question from the audience, and it's for Dr. Villarreal. How old was Dr. Villarreal when he protested?
Well, I was probably, when he came to town, Cesar, I was walking with him, I guess, and my mom, but I do have a story to tell. I was part of the UC Riverside shutting down of Highlander Hall during, I think, Prop 227. And I was just kind of behind the scenes because I didn't want to get in trouble because I was just on academic probation and I don't want to get in trouble, but I was behind the scenes in the hall when they made the president sit on the ground because of all the controversy. It was wild to watch, and it was an interesting experience, I'll say that. But no, I mean, my protests come with my actions now, with the kind of work that I do with nonprofits and in the school system. I have high expectations for our community and for those around me, as you can imagine by my passion. I think I'm sadly, my parents from Durango, Mexico, so not only soy alacrán, but also I'm a Scorpio, so that's a little deadly combination, I would say.
Thank you. Our next question is from the audience, and it's going to be for both speakers. It's going to be, how can students become involved in advocating for farm workers?
Well, there are many opportunities. I mean, we're talking about service today, and I think that service is very important, and being out there and creating opportunities to bring the voice and the experiences of the farm workers, I think is important. Going out and meeting with them, going to community sites, I think is also really important. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have a farm working background. Some of my friends did, and I'm not from California, although I've lived in California for 6 years, but I'm a Tejana. And I have followed the work of Cesar Chavez and also Dolores Huerta. You can see a poster that she signed for me when I lived in California, and it says, sí, to Laura, sí se puede, adelante. So I think in many ways, there's many ways to do activism. I mean, certainly we can go out to the streets and do protests and all of that, but I think another form of activism is getting your education. Make sure that you get the most education that you can, because it is that's going to give you the clout and a little bit more of legitimacy for you to go out there and share your knowledge and make a difference for others. That's another form of activism.
Yeah, I just would say, have your own little protests, right? Have your own moments. And I don't mean to sort of dwindle it down to this, but write your Yelp review. Pay that waiter or waitress a little more. Just do it doesn't have to take you having to do a sit-in. There's other ways. As we get microaggressions, we can do it right back, right? And then we can get macro if we need to. But at the end of the day, just make those small moments count that matter, that can lift somebody up. But always remember, you got to train people how to treat you. That's words that I'll always repeat until my last breath. You must train people how to treat you. And that's really important. And that means in a good way, and that means in a bad way, right, too. But not everything has to be grandiose and big. You can do them just small steps.
I think those are important points, Dr. Villarreal. I'm also reminded of another way to give back. And one of the things that I've done is provide scholarship money over time to fund scholarships for students. In fact, at Arizona State University, I was there in the 90s for about 9 years. The Chicano Faculty and Staff Association created a scholarship in my name. After I left some money actually for that to happen. And I'm so pleased that that scholarship program has taken off and has made multiple scholarships over the past 10, 15 years to students. It's our way of giving back. Find a way to give back. That's what it is. That's the activism. Find a way to give back. Even a small gesture can go a long way.
Thank you so much for your answers. They're very meaningful and they do serve a lot for us as students. Our next question is for both, and it's why should students become involved in community social issues?
Well, I mean, community and social issues seep into our everyday lives. I was just watching the trial involving the murder of George Floyd, heart-wrenching testimony. That is seeping into colleges and universities. Students are talking about these issues. Students are doing Black Lives Matter. Students are learning about what's going on here at the border. I'm from Laredo, right on the border, and what's happening, what happened in the past, those terrible family separation issues. People are talking, for example, last month here, we had a horrible freeze in Texas that you might have learned about that impacted low-income people much more. Pipes broke, children got sick, some people died. And why is it that those that are low income suffered the most? There are so many injustices in our society that still remain to be solved. The way that COVID impacted our communities has been devastating. We need you, the next generation, to help us to solve these issues, to help us move forward so that our children, your children, don't have to suffer what the children today are suffering. This generation has to step in and heal some of the trauma that has happened in the past. So it's really important that you look at your education, not just to learn facts and figures and gather knowledge. All of that is super important. I want you to be super smart, but I also want you to be good human beings. I want you to get along with others. I want you to be team players. I want you to make this world a better place to live for all of us, not just the rich.
Well said. I would say that, this isn't about Democrat, Republican, right? This is about the human condition. And I think at the end of the day, you got to think about the human side of this, the heart of it. And I think that's really important for us to really embrace as a community. And like I said, it doesn't have to be something big. It could just be giving to others. It could be money. It could be service. It could be your time. The amount of time that I've given to our allies, our white brothers and sisters, right? Our African-American brothers and sisters, our Polynesian brothers and sisters, our Asians, the time that I've given of my own time reviewing resumes, cover letters, that's service to others. And that doesn't cost anything. That's just a simple ask. And it's a simple requirement for me to not expect back. That's service. That's giving back. I don't expect anything in return. I'm not going to ask for, hey, can you give me a little LinkedIn review? That's not the point. The point is, if I'm going to give, I'm going to give, right? And if people aren't ready to receive it, then that's another thing, right? We need to think about how people receive information. It's where it's at. I mean, I think you'll get there in your life. You don't have to do it all right now as youth, but I'm already looking at retirement here, right? I'm already thinking about it. So we need some of y'all to be doing this work. It's just cannot land on Dr. Rendon and myself. We need you in so many ways, and it's really beyond this pandemic. Let's not let this pandemic go to waste, everybody. Let's keep this energy when we take our masks off.
Thank you so much. Up next, we have a question for Dr. Rendon. Does she have ways or best practices for educators to virtually validate students through online learning?
Yes, one of the ways, I mean, as we pivoted to online learning and online webinars such as this, we had to figure things out, and it happened so quickly. And now we've become, kind of experts at it, some of us more than others. But faculty, I think, when it comes to validation, a simple thing such as asking, how are you today, can go a long way. That is a very, very important question. Letting students know, I know that so many of you are having difficulties. I know that some of you are being impacted by the pandemic more than others. And so I know that, and I'm here to help you. Also asking students, what's important for you? What would you like to study? What kind of topics are important for you? So letting students know that what they want to do is important. And being careful not to invalidate students, particularly at this time. We've gone through a really tough time. 2020 will be remembered by our generation for a long time to come. We have to learn the lessons of 2020 as well. And I hope, like Dr. Villarreal said, that we're not going back to same old, that we're going to make some changes. And I think one of the changes that faculty need to make is to learn to establish validating relationships with students, to work with compassion, to work with care, to let students know that we care for them and that we're there for them. I think those kinds of actions go a long way.
Thank you. Up next, we have a question for both our guest speakers. Do our speakers have any insight into how we can better educate ourselves to serve elementary migrant students?
Go ahead, Dr. Villarreal.
The question is to serve elementary migrant students?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, well, look, I'm doing this initiative at our community that reading is freedom. Leer es libertad. It has to start with reading. That's what you have to do. You have to expose everyone to multiple types of authors. I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter is a great book that we just read, and we Stamped is another great book we just read. And there's a lot that you need to do to empower them. Look, here's how you do this. Students, children must have more books than toys in their home. And that goes for your children, that goes for migrant children. You need to expose them to the language in both languages. And I would say the other part is don't take their culture away. Don't take their language away. Don't be so quick to assimilate them because you have a trauma that they may get made of, or they may fill in the blank, right? So you just got to remember that they need to honor their culture. They need to honor their language. And it's okay to speak Spanglish, my people. For those folks that are hard on the Spanish, don't worry about that. Don't believe the hype, right? It's okay to speak Spanish. And nothing against the Texans, but they speak Spanglish really well, right, Dr. Rendon?
That's right.
But it's okay. It's okay. And I always say, orale, talk to Dr. Lara all the time to him. I say things like that. So know that that's okay to do. But reading is critical, and it's our freedom.
I would agree. I think reading, writing are critical skills that all of us, as particular students, to succeed in college, you've got to read and write really, really well. Of course, mathematics is also important. But I also want to stress to be careful not to invalidate these students early on. I mean, I've heard that students are failing kindergarten, and I'm like, what? How can you fail kindergarten? I mean, that is a gross form of invalidation. Help them to feel that they belong. Help them to feel that this school is for them, that they have a place in that school. And so that all of those actions, I think, are really, really important. Letting them know that they can succeed, that they can go as far as they want to go, and that we're there for them to help them to achieve their hopes and dreams.
Thank you both. We have a question for both our speakers, and it's, what are some obstacles you both faced growing up?
You want to take that, Dr. Villar?
As my ancestors would say, ooh, ¿dónde empiezo? Where do I start? I mean, but at the end of the day, ooh, si vieras, if you would even see, right? I mean, those are real questions. And I just would say betrayal, right? With your own friends, being called a coconut because I like to read or like to do homework. ¿Cómo has cambiado? You changed, you know. And then, you know, the famous line of all lines in our culture is, ¿a poco? ¿Ya te crees? You know, it's who needs enemies, right? When you got your own people, man. And I would say that I think ultimately it just makes you stronger. It just does. I got bullied in school, but I thought they were being my friends because I got bullied more at home than there, right? And I kid, but that's sort of how sometimes it does happen. But I think ultimately you just got to be, you know, my trust in God. I was raised Catholic. I would say I'm more spiritual than religious, but that gave me some strength. And then certainly the work that my parents did. But it's just going to happen. You know, don't let these things make. Here's the thing. Everyone has a bubble. And I've taught this to our students, my students, when I was a counselor. Don't let people get in the bubble, and don't let people burst your bubble. And some may infiltrate that bubble, but just kick them out like quick styles. Give yourself a deadline. When people remember, hurt people. Don't forget that. Hurt people. Doesn't make it right, but it's what's real. And so allow that to happen, and then boot them out of your bubble. So just be resolved that everything is temporary. Pain is temporary. Just remember that.
Yeah, those are really good points. I think one of the struggles for me was at a very early age, my parents separated. I was about 3 or 4 years old. My mom had to work to help the family survive. We went through some very tough times of poverty. Sometimes we didn't have enough to eat. I had holes in my shoes. So those were tough times, but it's interesting because growing up in Laredo, that was one of the poorest cities in the nation. So I thought everybody was like that. I had no idea that there were, rich people in the world until much later, which was kind of good in a sense, that I didn't have to deal with that. But, growing up in poverty, I think it leaves an impact on you, but it also is a way for us to come to terms with it and to realize that those hardships, like that dicho, hay que sufrir para merecer, pues yo sufrí también. Y ahora, I have a really, really nice house. I have a great car. I'm nowhere near where I was when I was 3 or 4 years old, when I didn't even know that I could even have this, or even imagine that I have what I have now. So those were tough times, but I learned from them. They're always a part of me. They will always be a part of me. I'm proud of where I came from. I'm proud of my parents and what they did. They were not perfect all the time, but they did the best that they could.
Thank you both for sharing your responses with us. So we have one more question for both presenters, and it's, what advice do you have for someone who is wanting to apply to graduate school but does not have any family who can provide tips or suggestions?
I think that if you can find someone, a faculty member or someone who has gone to graduate school that can give you some tips and pave the way, would be really, really important. When I was going, I left Laredo, the first one in my family to leave Texas to go to school in Michigan, at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And I had no idea what it took to get into doctoral study. But I just did a lot of reading on my own, and I knew this one person that had gone to Michigan. I contacted him, and he was able to give me some advice. But some of it you're just going to have to learn on your own and by the seat of your pants. And when I got to Michigan, I mean, it's one of the top schools in the nation. So there I was sitting in class with students that had gone to, Harvard and Yale. And here I was, this person from South Texas that had not gone to some of these top schools. But I found that I could, I could do this. I was able to match their intelligence, and actually, I finished out of the 25 students that went in that year. I was the first one to finish my doctorate, my dissertation, one dissertation of the year, and I was able to do this. I developed a good network of students who were Latino at Michigan. We all knew each other, we supported each other, and they all went on to do great things. So that was a great thing for me too, having that support system at the university, very important as well.
Yeah, I would say with graduate school, you got to do research on the imposter syndrome, because that's going to happen. Look up imposter syndrome. That's going to be a big issue for you, for many of you, whether you're a white woman, whether it's sort of a thing that happens to us, for most of us. And I would say when it comes to grad school, look for a mentor, seek out that relationship. You have two sitting right here in front of you, willing to give you that support. And look for multiple voices. But in the end, remember, you're only alone if you want to be. You're only isolated if you want to be. And graduate school is going to be difficult. Understood. It is an American system. We understand. But you can see wonderful results that Dr. Rendon shared about her work. There's a lot of things you can do. And if you ever decide to get a doctorate, we certainly need more folks of color, women, allies to be doctors, whether it's a doctorate in education or a PhD or a medical degree. But in the end, you have to think about this. The best dissertation is a done dissertation. So don't go in thinking you're going to, solve the world with a dissertation. Just get it done. Do good work. Do scholarly work, right? But in the end, you put too much pressure on yourself, all of a sudden you'll be an ABD, right? All but dissertation. We don't want that. We want to make sure you follow through all the way to the end. But reach out.
Thank you so much for your responses. Up next, we're going to have Dr. Renzo Lara, and he's going to be doing the closing and remarks.
Well, thank you so much to Dr. Rendon and Dr. Villarreal, Dr. Lee, how we like to call him, for being here today. Oftentimes we mention this as it's a day on rather than a day off when we're doing the Cesar Chavez legacy. And we know that there's a lot of individuals who we celebrate on this legacy, not just with Cesar Chavez, but with the farm workers. So we always try to bring individuals that are able to touch from this multicultural intersectional lens and really bring their own story and how they're also connected in some way or another to service leadership and also to community service. So again, I want to thank you all for being here, especially on the middle of the week where we have it off, especially to our speakers again, Dr. Rendon, Dr. Villarreal, really powerful for you to share your stories, the work you do in the community, and really for you to be here and share all the work that we continue to do with the Latino and Latinx community, and also the marginalized community that we serve. So before you all leave, we do want to mention that we have a survey that we want you to fill out. It's a quick survey, but it really tells us what we can do in order to continue to improve the event. Or also, we know it's a virtual event, but also ways for us to continue to do the work in terms of serving leadership and civic engagement. And so I also want to briefly recognize the committee that was part of this. There are several individuals who are part of this effort that make it work, from students to administrators, to faculty. Really appreciate all the work that y'all have taken in order to make this happen. We've been planning for several months. And so on the day of service, we actually have in-person opportunities to volunteer. Obviously, because of COVID, we were able to do something different, and hopefully it was impactful for all of you. So I want to give a big shout out to all our committee members who are part of this virtual Cesar Chavez Day of Service, and also to some of the links that our committee members mentioned. Floyd mentioned, Dr. Perez and Ethnic Studies. There is a resource guide in regards to the farm workers, and also the link in regards to the NPR article and so on. So again, please complete the survey and let us know your thoughts. Let us know what was the impact and experience. And again, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you around. Take care.
Alrighty, that concludes our program for today. So thank you so much for Dr. Rendon and Dr. Villarreal. This was a fantastic conversation, just getting to learn a little more about your insight. And it was amazing for me. I've taken all the notes, and so I can't wait to just follow up with you and also share the link with everyone who's come to the event today. We'll go ahead and send out the link in the next few days. It's going to take a while for it to populate, but thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. Please continue to treat this as a day on, and maybe do a small act of service as you go about the rest of your day. Thank you all, and have a great afternoon.